Welcome back to part 7 of our live training session here with our K24 swapped Civic Si. In this training module, we're going to take a look at cold start and warm-up enrichment, making sure that the cranking fuel and the fuel that we deliver after the engine's fired off is proper on a cold engine. We're going to take a look at our acceleration enrichment, making sure we have good throttle response and we're not under or over fueling the engine as we're having our throttle changes. We're also going to take a look at setting up a basic launch control, and then lastly we're going to be looking at setting up and working with our Flex Fuel base tune. So we're going to put ethanol in our fuel system and see what kind of power we can gain by running higher ethanol concentration in our fuel system. We can usually pick up and use 5 or 10 more horsepower, so we're going to see how that process is going to unfold towards the end of the tutorial. We have a lot to cover. Let's jump in so we can check this out. Welcome back to our live training session here with our K24 swapped Civic Si. This tutorial, we're going to jump in and take a look at our cold start, making sure that we have good crank, fire, and run of our engine. The air fuel as it's warming up also needs to be checked, so we're going to be looking at our post-start fueling, our warm-up enrichment fueling, making sure that's all in order so the engine can crank and fire and run and have a proper air fuel from all the way cold till when we get all the way to the warmed up state where we have already at in the last tutorial when we were running the engine when it was warm. So this is going to be day 2 of tuning and working with this particular vehicle. So we've let it sit overnight, and this is going to be the test of how much cranking fuel we're going to need, as well as all these other modifier tables that we have in place. Now, we weren't able to go and take a look at the post-start enrichment or the warm-up enrichment on a warm engine simply because we hadn't initially, when we started to begin doing the tuning process, had the main VE table dialed in. So that's going to be our table 1 for the low cam operation. That wasn't completely calibrated. Now we know that's calibrated. The injector data is good. So our fuel and airflow model are nailed down on a warm engine. Now our compensation modifier tables can be applied properly on top of what we have established for a warm running engine. So what we're going to do here, we're going to record, we're going to data log this, crank fire, see what it does, see if it runs, see if it's going to stall out, see if it's going to idle too high. We have an idle control aspect to our cold start as well. We need to go and establish our base position idle table so that we have the appropriate amount of duty cycle commanded to the idle control motor, so we have enough airflow coming into the engine to maintain the desired idle speed when the engine is cold. We have the desired target idle speed set at 1200 in our target table. 12 to 1400 is a reasonable target to have on a cold engine, allowing it to come up to operating temperature. So we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of different things here with cold start. Now, once we finish the cold start and the warm up and we tweak and adjust at whatever we need, we're going to take a look at our acceleration enrichment, making sure that when we're giving a throttle tip-in event, so if we're driving and we mash the throttle, we're gonna have an appropriate fueling response to our throttle input, making sure it's not too lean, too rich, and we have good throttle response. We're also gonna take a look at setting up a launch control here real quickly, just a basic 2-step. And then lastly, we're gonna take a look at setting up our Flex Fuel tune. Now, we already set up our model multi-fuel mode. We have our Flex Fuel sensor enabled. It was reading roughly 15 to 20% as we've been doing the tire calibration process because I had a little bit of ethanol fuel mixed in my fuel system already. We're gonna go drain the remaining amount of fuel in the tank, which, looking at my gauge here, it's about a quarter tank of fuel. We're gonna get all that petrol ethanol blend out, and we're gonna put in 10 gallons of fresh ethanol, and then we're gonna see where the ethanol content goes to, and then fire up the engine and do the tuning process on Flex. It's actually extremely simple. Everything within the Flex Fuel base control overlays on top of the work we've already done on petrol fuel. So it's always important that we tune the engine first on petrol, then we can move over to ethanol and see the effect and dial everything in. It's, again, super simple. We shouldn't have to make any fueling adjustments at all. We should only have to tweak and adjust our spark timing. So we'll get into what that all means a little bit later here in the tutorial when we look at Flex Fuel. It's going to be the very last thing we take a look at. So we'll do some driving, we'll do some pulls in the dyno with ethanol in the system and see what kind of effect it has. It may not do anything. It may give us 10, 15 horsepower. We don't know yet. So let's go here. I'm going to go into the startup window. I go into our fuel trim, and we have our cranking enrichment table, we have our cranking hold time table, post-start enrichment, and we have our warm-up enrichment. We don't know if what these values populated in the table for these colder coolant temperature. Right now we're sitting at roughly 68 degrees. We don't know if these are going to be valid or not, if we need to tweak and adjust them. What I am going to do before we actually fire off the engine is just decrease the crank hold time table values. This holds the cranking enrichment injector pulse width for, in this case, 0.7, 0.6 seconds, so about a 500 milliseconds, 600 milliseconds. It hangs that pulse within just a little longer after we've cranked the engine over. This is probably going to create some problems. If you recall, when we fired up the engine in the third tutorial, when we were doing the getting the engine to fire up and run, and we knew we had to get it up to operating temperature, we were ignoring how it was running when it was cold. It ran actually rough and extremely rich as soon as we fired it off, and it was likely because the crank hold time table here was simply too long. So I'm going to go and shrink this down to something like 0.2 seconds or 200 milliseconds. It's going to hold this cranking enrichment value. Also, the cranking enrichment value here is probably going to be a little bit too high. We have it at 300%. This is a 300% multiplier to whatever is being calculated from our main volumetric efficiency table, airflow, and fuel model. So this could be excessive. I'm going to back this down to something like 200, and we'll have to see what that does. Now, if we look here, this table is set up on ethanol content, so it's a 500% multiplier at 90% ethanol, and then it tapers. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.